This is Ken Hance, best storyteller in Texas. The saying of the day, it's not over till it's over. And the reason I use that today, it's the end of football season as far as the college game is concerned. And there'll be a lot of people that will get fired, and it's not over till it's over. Of course, I think back to the old, they said it was not over till the fat lady sings, and when the economy got so bad in Midland, somebody had some bumper stickers down there and said, "She is warming up. She just cleared her throat." It was a bad, tough time. But it's not over till it's over. But there'll be some people find out this weekend they got fired. I saw that friend Neal Brown got fired at West Virginia after Texas Tech beat them 52-15, and if you're going to get whipped like that, you sure hope it's an early game. But Neal Brown's a great coach, and I don't know if they'll find any better. But all these coaches bargain for such a great contract. There's a lot of places they can't fire them. They don't have enough money to. And so they have to hang on for a while. And some places are still paying off, not just one coach, but two. And so that a lot of firings, but that's the end of the season. Mac Brown's a great guy, one of the nicest persons I've ever met. And he won a national championship at UT, and within 3 or 4 years they fired him, pushed him out, and then later he was on TV as a commentator, and later North Carolina hired him back, and he won, and they were looking good, and this year they had a bad year. But you get one bad year, having won a national championship like it did at UT 3 years ago, they'll just fire you. And the justification for that is that they're paying so much in this day and time that everybody's going, well, if a guy's getting paid $7 million a year or $5 million or even $3 million, then they can get fired. But the ones that get fired, they're not going to be homeless, I'll tell you that, with the contracts they have. The people that have the toughest job are the ones in Division I that are not in one of the 4 power conferences. And, you take my friend, at Louisiana Tech, Sonny Cumbie's a good coach, and but it's hard to compete down there because he has to have 1 or 2 games where he plays at A&M or Michigan or someplace where they make some money. Speaking of Neal Brown, that he was the coach at I'm trying to think the school in Alabama, and they got invited to LSU to play, and LSU played them. I think they paid them $1.5 million, and they went in there and beat them. And they're not going to invite you back if they pay you $1.5 million. They don't expect you to come back and beat them. But in basketball, the lower Division I schools, that's how they make a lot of their revenue, because they'll get $100,000 a game, and a lot of them will wind up with a 2-7 record in non-conference because they had to have those to pay for their season. I've only been fired one time in my life, and that's when I was working for Governor Smith. And I've mentioned this story before. And Bob Bullock was my boss. He was on the staff. He was like deputy chief of staff for Governor Smith. And one day he came in. That's back when he was drinking. He was hungover and mad, and there's been a major mistake that weekend by the campaign. And he fired me, and I wasn't the one that did it. I tried to explain it, and I couldn't even get in a word. So, he left, told me to get out, and that I was fired. And so I was packing, and Bob Glasgow, who later, like myself, got elected state senate, came in. He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Bullock just fired me." And I'm packing. He said, "What did he fire you for?" And I told him. He said, "Well, you didn't do that." So that was so-and-so. And so he said, "Let's go down and I'll explain it." So we went down to Bullock's office, and I said, "I'm going to wait out here. He's still mad at me. He might take it out on you." And I'm listening. I can hear him, and he got mad because Glasgow took up for him, and he fired Glasgow. And so we walked back to our office. They were both packing. And Larry Teaver, who was chief of staff, came in and said, "What are y'all doing?" We said, "Bullock fired us." He said, "You get back to work or I will fire you. And if I fire you, you're fired." He said, "Ignore it." And so about 11:30, Bullock came down to our office and he said, "You guys want to have lunch? I'll buy you lunch." We went and had lunch with him, and everything was okay, but it was an odd time. Bullock every once in a while would always laugh about the time he fired me. And he said if he had known that I was going to be a state senator and congressman, or that Glasgow was going to be a state senator, he wouldn't have fired either one of us.
Chancellor, you mentioned college football. There were some ugly scenes across the country at the end of college football games this weekend. The most notable probably Ohio State and Michigan.
That was incredible. I think no one believed that Michigan had a chance, and they went in there and beat them. And they got that Michigan flag, and we're going to plant it on the big O for the Ohio State that's out on the field. And the Ohio State players got mad about it, and scuffle broke out, and the police wound up using mace and pepper spray to break it up. And see, the referees were gone. I mean, you couldn't throw a yellow flag, and nobody's going to. But hey, during a fist fight, if you were in a bar in Odessa and got in a fist fight and somebody threw a yellow flag, do you think anybody's going to stop hitting on somebody? No, they're going to continue. You can throw 10 yellow flags. Now, if you hit somebody in the face with spray, with mace or pepper spray, they might stop. But that's not going. They're not going to stop. They're pushing, shoving, and they're mad and swinging helmets and all kinds of things. The smart ones, I always looked in those highlight films. The smart ones do not take their helmets off. Some of the smart ones will kind of get over the edge and get out of it, but the ones that take their helmet off, I guess they think they can use that as a club. Well, someone else may think that too, and you won't have any protection there, and they're not going to throw a 15-yard penalty for targeting. You were targeting during the scuffle after the game. That'll be 15 yards beginning the next game that you have next year. I don't see that happening. But the ones that got into it, Michigan and Ohio State, Florida and Florida State, North Carolina State and North Carolina, and Arizona State and Arizona. And, all those are major rivals. And then Houston and Brigham Young got into it last night late. And that was when I think Brigham Young, they decided not to turn the other cheek. They didn't put up with it, and so it little scuffle. But I think that there'll be some NCAA rules come out about trying to plant a flag. It goes back. It started when Baker Mayfield was at OU, and they beat Ohio State in Columbus, Ohio, and he got that OU flag and planted it out on the field. And so it goes back to that point in time. Sarkanian last night, I thought, handled the situation real good in that there were 2 or 3 Texas players when the game was over, were jumping up and down on the A&M deal. He stopped that real fast. I mean, he didn't let that get out of hand. And he had a great respect for A&M and should, but both of them great universities, and having a big football game, you don't need to get sidetracked with all the other things that can come about. But a lot of emotions, and I tell you, look at the coach at Ohio State. His record with against Michigan, he's won 1 and lost 4, and his record against everybody else is 47-1. Wow, they've got his number, but Michigan didn't have the material that they've had in the past. Now, I'll tell you this: when they say Michigan doesn't have material, Michigan's always going to have material. That there are a number of schools that are always going to have players that are good players, and they may not be playing together well. They may, for whatever reason, they may not be playing well. But that's that coming back to what we started on, the fighting and scuffling and everything. I don't think anybody got hurt, but no one was taken to any hospital or anything. Their pride may have been hurt. But one of the commentators, one of the sports announcers last night said the best way for Ohio to stop that from happening is beat Michigan, and they can't, it's a little hard for them to go out and plant the flag. Yeah, let's go plant the flag. They beat us, but we got to plant the flag. And that's kind of maybe the NCAA will do something. They're not much in use anymore, and after NIL and everything, they don't do much, and so maybe they'll come out and say you can't plant the flag, or try to get a little more control over the players after the game's over.
I often wonder if one of those players that does take their helmet off and hits somebody with the helmet in the head or the face, could they get assault charges?
They could. That happened one time when Texas Tech was playing A&M, and there was a guy and I can't think of his name, that was a player for A&M, and he slugged some Tech fan, and they filed assault charges on him, and I think the district attorney or county attorney's office kind of dismissed it. After a while, they thought it was best not to. The fan may have been taunting him. I don't remember all the details, but he popped him, and you can get filed on for assault. You can get injured at a game. I think one of the great lawsuits in all time was what's a Boston hockey team?
The Bruins.
Bruins. They were playing a hockey game, and the puck went over the glass and hit a woman in the teeth, hit her in the mouth, and she spit it and a bunch of her teeth out, and later sued them, and she won a bunch of money, and then the appellate court reversed it, and they reversed it, and the students that law professors talked to about the case said the ruling was that she just got pucked. And so, a little play on words there. But it didn't you can get assaulted at an event, but it's rare that anything like that happens. The Philadelphia Eagles, they have a justice of the peace in the stadium. They set bond at the stadium. And so, it can be a rough atmosphere. And if you go to Philadelphia and you get a fight or something, they'll set your bond and let you go on home unless you're too unruly. If you're too unruly, they'll just put you in a paddy wagon and make a lot of sharp 90-degree turns on the way to the station. I could always tell when a paddy wagon had somebody in there that wasn't favorable, they'd make those 90-degree turns.
Chancellor, last week we started talking about some of the cabinet member appointments that President Trump has made, and we still had a few more to talk about.
There was some. I noticed one that Susie Wiles is going to be chief of staff. We talked about that last week and how she had run a great campaign and he respected her and everything. And Brooke Rollins from Texas, that she is the first woman to ever be elected president of the student body at Texas A&M. She's originally from Glen Rose. And a lot of people thought she would be chief of staff, but I think that Susie worked so closely with the president on the campaign, they made that decision, and then made Brooke Secretary of Agriculture, and she'll do a good job. She's a quick learner on everything, and she'll do an outstanding job, and so that was a good appointment. Marco Rubio is not going to have any trouble getting through the Senate. If somebody in the Senate gets nominated for something, they usually don't have trouble unless there's one senator really mad at them. And that John Tower was going to be Secretary of Defense, would have been a great one, and was a great senator. And he had Sam Nunn, who was chairman of Armed Services from Georgia, had a lot of personal feelings about Tower, didn't like him, and went out of his way to break him. and that's unfortunate. Tower knew the Pentagon knew what was going on and where they'd save money, and but most of the time, somebody that's been in the U.S. Senate, they're going to sail through pretty fast. The Attorney General nominee, Pam Bondi, she had been Attorney General in Florida. I think that she'll be, she's non-controversial compared to what they'd had before when Matt Gaetz was announced, and she's very non-controversial compared to him. She'll get some tough questions, and that anyone that's going to be Attorney General, Democrats are going to ask them a lot of questions. Are you out to get us? Are you out to indict people you don't like? And I think she's going to probably say that we're not going to go after indictments on anyone unless they've broken the law, period. And that's
Chance,
hard.
I have a question for you about about the Attorney General appointment with going back to when it was Matt Gaetz. And we all know that President Trump values loyalty. Do you think there's any possibility that President Trump nominated Gaetz, knowing full well that he would probably not be confirmed, just to see, to flush out the people that were against him? So he would find out who's with him, who's against him. And he did find out there was about 9 Republicans that said under no circumstances would they vote to confirm him.
Right. I think that's one of the stories, the rumors that's out there. And I don't know if that's the exact reason, but I tell you, if it's not, it's a strong secondary reason. And that he finds out that on a tough appointment, these 9 are the most likely to fall by the wayside as far as supporting my nominees. And so I think that was part of it, but I'd be reluctant to say that was the main reason. I think that it's people writing their memoirs and some history will determine exactly why and how that decision was made. We also, HHS, Robert Kennedy Jr. getting that appointment, I have to say he got a lot of criticism, and Kelsey Gabbard, the former Democrat that got the National Security Advisor, they're going to get tougher scrutiny because the Democrats don't like somebody that will, go with the other side, and they'll get tougher scrutiny. But for Kennedy, I think he had to be really sincere about this whole thing, and that he was, and that this means a lot to him, and he's going to talk about some issues that have not been talked about as much in the past as maybe they should. And he'll have a lot to say about what's going on, and he'll be working closely with people at the Federal Drug Administration. That's as far as medicines are concerned. There's going to be a lot of different people with different views and ideas when we come to regulating medicine and when it can be approved and when it can't be approved. One of the other things I wanted to mention is the Office of Management and Budget, which is a cabinet position. Russ Vaught is the nominee, and 99.9% of the people never heard of him. He was deputy director of OMB during the last 2 years of Trump's administration in 2019 and 2020. He is a smart guy. He went to Wheaton College and then got his J.D. degree at George Washington University. But he's been involved in government quite a while. He's very loyal to Trump. And that's a big position because they'll come up with a lot of rulings that will affect what the government spends on certain things. And they will be deeply involved with Elon Musk and Vivek to see what cuts are going to come about. And, that going back to making cuts and trying to trim the budget, when I was in Congress, there was a group, Phil Grace. He had Grace Chemical, Grace Fertilizer, and he was really a smart guy. And he came up with a bunch of recommendations for Reagan that there be certain cuts, and so they'll have some cuts. And I don't know how they're going to make enough cuts unless you do something about the entitlements. But the president does not want to do anything on Social Security, and I think the key there is if you just slow down the increases, that you say instead of a 3% increase, we'll have a 1% or something. You got so many people, you have 10,000 people a day coming on Social Security. But if you take Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the national defense, and the interest on the national debt, that's a little over 80% of the budget. So if you eliminate the rest of the budget, you still hadn't balanced it. So you got to work at a lot of things, or a lot of things, and there'll be things that come out. The Congress got hit one time before I was there about they'd had a study on the sex life of the testy fly. And, that's not easy to vote for that and go home and run on re-election of the sex life of the testy fly. But what they were doing, they were trying to test it and find out if they could keep it from multiplying. In other words, it'd die off. And that saved billions of dollars in the timber industry and made housing a little cheaper. So that one made sense. There was a university in Texas, it wasn't Texas Tech, that did a study, and I think they spent somewhere around $8 million on why people had sex, and they came back and found out that they were attracted to each other. Now, who would have guessed that? They'd have it study and said, well, maybe they're attracted to each other, and said, golly, can you believe that? Boy, that's a great study. You can't justify things like that, and those votes will get people beat. So there's going to be a lot of things that come up that they'll try to do cuts on within the first 2 years when Trump's got Republicans have control of the House and Senate, and he's got a working majority, and that's important. The UN ambassador, Elise Stefanik, she's very strong, very good. She worked for Bush. She's been in politics a long time. She's only 40 years old, but most of her life she's been in Washington working politics. She went to undergraduate at Harvard. She's very smart, and she is not afraid of anyone. And we mentioned last week, she's the one that was very critical of the college presidents at Columbia and I think Penn and maybe Yale or Harvard, one of the ones. And two of the three, didn't last long after she got through asking the questions. But she'll be a strong UN representative, and I think the president made a good decision in that regard. One other thing that the last week's come up with, that Tom Homan, who's going to be the border czar, he is not going to back down on things where he thinks he's right. And some of these mayors in sanctuary cities are saying, we're not going to let them have them. We're not going to. The first round that Trump and his people are trying to do is to send back and deport people that came here out of prison. Now how can you, if you're the mayor of Denver, saying, well, you can't pick up these people that have committed crimes and send them back? No, we want them to stay here. Or if they were in an insane asylum, you just can't deny. You can't deny the federal government the right to pick them up. But Denver and Chicago and a few other places saying we're going to do it. We want them to stay here. I do not see how you can justify that. And if Democrats really get behind that, they'll get some of their people defeated. That's kind of like defund the police. That's one of the polls show that it'll run 80 to 90% if you ask the question, should people that are convicted felons be sent back to their home country that they left? And the public's going to be, yes, they should, immediately. And Homan, they're not going to have an easy time with him. The Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins, a lot of you will remember Doug from impeachment hearings, and he was on the Judiciary Committee. He was a ranking Republican at that point in time. He's from Georgia. He's been very loyal to the president, and I think he'll do an outstanding job. He went to northern Georgia. He was a state representative. He also went to seminary, and he has a JD degree, so he's a practicing lawyer as well. In the Department of Energy, the DOE, the secretary is going to be Chris Wright, and he is CEO and chairman of the board of Liberty Energy, and they're the second largest hydrofracking company in America. And he was a guy that went to MIT and got 2 degrees, and then went and got a master's at Cal Berkeley. He's a really smart guy. He's a good businessman, and he will, I think, will do an outstanding job. Interior, remember this, the governor, Doug Burgum, was one of the ones being looked at for vice president. And Governor Burgum, he made a lot of money in software. He went to North Dakota State when he was in college, and then he went to Stanford and got an MBA. And he built up a company and became CEO, and they sold out to Microsoft. And he worked for Microsoft and did them a good job. And he was somebody that's going to be excellent. Those are just a few. We'll finish maybe the rest of them next week. And it's an exciting time as you have a new government coming in. And Trump's way ahead of most of them. This time, he's making these appointments fast. I mean, he started out that first week. And a lot of people talk about the transition team. There'll be a transition team, and there already is, for the 4,000 other appointments, but the high-profile cabinet members, the transition team is in Donald Trump's mind, and that's the transition team. It's a transition team of 1. Now, he may get some input from some people, but he's going to make that decision, and I think that what he's done this time is that he wants to make sure those people are loyal to him, and that he doesn't get into conflicts with some of the ones he had, like came up before. Our saying of the day was, it's not over till it's over, and football season is over. In college ranks, we've still got the bowl games to go in the playoffs, but once it's the regular season's over, there'll be a lot of people that'll get relieved and they'll move on down the road. But I always think at least they're not going to be broke. If you take 40 years ago, a coach got fired, he was making $35,000 to $85,000, and it was he had to get out and hustle for a job real fast. But now some of these people, that if they don't find another job, they have to be paid off, and so sometimes a person will get fired, and the school may owe them anywhere from $2 to $10 million or even more. And what happens? The person will go to another school and work for free, so they won't. So they'll make sure that school that fired them, has to continue to pay them.